Good evening to all members of ICOMOS India National Scientific Committee on Risk Preparedness. Wish you all a very happy new year and thank you for joining us today. I'm Priyanka Panjwani, the coordinator of NSC Risk Preparedness, and along with my co-coordinator Shahzad, I'm happy to welcome you to the 2022 edition of the CultuRisk Tech Talks and monthly meetings. CultuRisk Tech Talks is a member-driven knowledge-sharing initiative which began in September 2021, and it aligns with the ICOMOS India Strategic Plan and the MOA. It is being conducted on the second Saturday of every month. Before we begin our talk, this is a gentle reminder of a few housekeeping rules on the slide. Thank you. Today, I'm very delighted to invite my colleague and fellow member, Swapna Kothari, to present the CultuRisk Tech Talks. Swapna Kothari is a practicing conservation architect and site preservation professional. An advocate for the built environment and traditions, her portfolio of engagement involves work with the National Trust for Historic Places in the USA, the Archaeological Survey of India, local heritage bodies, both public and non-profit, individual owners of historic properties, as well as national defense agencies. With over 7 years of experience and interdisciplinary connections across the world, Swapna is also an educator of young minds, many of whom have made a foray into the field, and is a key advocate in promoting heritage education and research along with her academic pursuits. Her key interest engages discussions revolving around the use and evolution of buildings and how institutions cross-culturally aid each other with the conservation tools and theories. I hand over the virtual floor to you now, Swapna, and looking very much forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Is the screen visible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. So the talk I'm going to be giving about was actually generated from what last time we were discussing. And this is a kind of, this is a research that I am continuously going on and doing. It is based on basically cultural artifacts, and we know that in India, our cultural artifacts are wide and far ranging. They comprise of this cultural wealth that I think it hasn't fathomed yet the reaches of it. It's basically undocumented, unprotected. It's vulnerable to pillaging and looting. And this trade, this antiquities trade, is a matter of immediate concern to us, because in the cultural heritage discourse in our country, we do not talk about looting of antiquities, of artifacts that come along with these movable objects or movable artifacts that are part of the ensemble of culture, the heritage that we normally look up to or look into. So the fact that that I'm going to be talking about is basically recent issues and developments that are there in the antiquity trade, the relevance of basically a sort of antiquity trafficking in our field, the ineffective laws or the infrastructure that is already there. Then in the conclusion, I will be giving slight mitigation strategies that I've been studying around the world. So a slight disclaimer before we go ahead. This will probably feel to a couple of you that it's very religious oriented, or it is like accusing someone of dereliction or of willful negligence, but it's none of that things. I am doing my best according to my knowledge of whatever information I've found. The image on your left is a temple in around Mysore city. It's the Vadagurudi Lakshi temple.
Now we move to second slide, but maybe we don't see the slideshow itself.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'll just continue with it.
Yeah.
So this image over here that you see is actually on the left is the temple when it was being worshipped, and as you can see, this is actually the latest in the terms of looting that has happened. So this is December 8th, 2021, and I have been doing this research only since 2016. And I say only since 2016 because the people who helped me in getting this research have been working on it since a longer time. Now, to understand why this is an entire concern and why I have been researching it and all that is primarily because I was introduced to the topic of antiquity theft when I was studying in Cornell, and I had gone down on the weekend to visit the Met Museum, and a couple of items over there struck me as out of place. They just didn't feel in place. And over discussions with my professor, I realized that many of them are just do not have the right provenance. They do not have the right markings to be there in that place at that time. So this discussion went on to go beyond, and in 2016 I started doing a research wherein I undertook what kind of concerns that we have in India in terms of cultural artifacts. And this is a basic idea that I think normally people do not see this. The miners plunder historical site in MP, temple priest found dead, the Ashtadhatu idols have been stolen. There are multiples and multiples of idols in unprotected temples that are easy pickings for smugglers. So the word loot actually comes from the Sanskrit word lutanti, and it is actually, it came into common parlance, or you can say in the British English, in around 18th century, because that's what used to be happening in the North Indian provinces. That is an imperial plunder, if you do not want to use the word loot. Now, going to a bit of a little history of the antiquities conservation in India. We have, as we all know, we have the Ministry of Culture, now Ministry of Culture and Tourism. Underneath, we have Archaeological Survey of India. It's the premier body that actually saves a lot of our structure, or maintains it, and advances archaeological research and activity. Underneath the ASI is the antiquity section, which is entrusted with legislations and regulating of exporting antiquities and preventing illicit trade. That was established in 1910. They have a data bank, which is actually, which was established in 1976. What this does, it is host, or is actually, it's in the Red Fort complex, and it has all the documents pertaining to the legalities or to the registration or the antiquity certificates, as we call it, for these objects and artifacts. Now, this is not enough in terms of the vast range of antiquities that we can see in our country, and hence the idea was that the Ministry of Culture and Tourism were getting different applications of different materials to be put in the data bank. Now, what they did was they launched in the NMMA. You might all know of the National Mission on Monuments and Antiquities. It was done in 2007. This was supposed to address documentation of all those. It's estimated that there is a 7 million antiquities out there. They had a 5-year mandate. Unfortunately, this mandate did not fulfill the number of antiquities that had to be recorded. And behind all of this, behind this legalities and behind the history of the antiquities conservation, is the fact that as the documentation continues slowly, cultural artifacts being stolen are rising at a faster pace. Just a small example is in 2000 to 2016, the Ministry of Culture actually recorded only 101 antiquities being stolen, while the National Crime Records data, they said that there were more than 4,100 cases of stolen cultural property. So there's a huge discrepancy in the same time period for the same artifact or the same cultural property that we are talking about. Even the CAG constantly tells about all of these discrepancies that we find in the numbers of what is being stolen and the theft cases that are being registered. Now, to just give you a slight breather once again, is the term antiquity, like we say, is what does it encompass? So under the act that I'll explain a little further, it is part of, it can be a work of art or a craftsmanship, an article, object, thing detached from any building or of any cave, but it has to be of historical importance. It should be illustrative. It should have scientific nature impact, and it should probably also have a concern towards, and it does mostly have concerns towards science, craft, literature, religion, customs, morals. So you will see that these artifacts that are there can range from the idols, like you see. They can be hacked from the stone carvings that are there in a cave. They can also be ivory, wood carvings, small prayer utensils, maps, church, altars, jewelry. I have read of cases where one particular emerald jade shivling was stolen not once, not twice, but thrice. I do not have the photo right now in the slide, but you can probably check it out. I can send the link also. So as you can see, the images on the left, that is the Kubera rattle, is actually only 3 or 4 inches in height. Even the bottom, the plaque with the figure of 54, these are also, this is also 3 to 4 inches in height only. And this was at the Toledo Museum. I will talk about the person who stole it in the coming slides. The other images over here are all objects, 13 of many objects from the Australian National Gallery of Art that were to be repatriated to our country. As you can see, they range from idols, stone, brass, statuaries, to even paintings and photographs. So these things, there is no limit to what can be stolen, is my main point to all of you. Now, coming to current legislations, many of us do not know of this, but are actually aware of the central acts, that is the Antiquities Export Control Act, which is now better known as the Antiquities and Art Treasures Act, which superseded the 1947 one in 1972. It is actually there to regulate the export of antiquities. It's there to prevent any smuggling, and it actually mandates that all objects of historical and cultural importance has to be registered with the ASI, and that the central government has the power to confiscate any objects from a person or owner with paid compensation based on an arbitrary market assessment. So if you are in possession of a antiquity which you do not have certificate for, that has to be given by your circle, your local circle, you will have to part with it, or it will get confiscated by the government. This is like I mentioned, there's an expert advisory comment in all the circles which determines the certificates and determines its antiquity value. Now in the state, we do not have any, like if you're talking about buildings, we have the AMSR Act, and then we have the State Department of Archaeology, which takes in the State AMSR Act. Over here, in cases of antiquities, unfortunately, there's no legal binding to them to the state. So everything happens at the central level. Now, what's happening in this case is that there is one specific force in Tamil Nadu, it's called the Crime Investigation Department, which has an idol wing, which actually is the only specially appointed and authoritative force which goes around the country as well as the world to restitute any kind of relic. Yes, it is, like its name suggests, very much focused on the idols, and there have been bodies that have been formulated recently in the last few years, which documents it's called the Hindu Charitables Act. I forget the entire acronym, but it's the Hindu charitable temples and all, which they have been recording all these, all of their temples for all of these movable idols, objects of importance, as well as cultural artifacts. Now, beyond the central and the state and the, like all the government authorities, like you can see in your screens, as a private groups. These groups are the ones which have aided almost all restitutions, all repatriations that have happened in our country. And they are very much like these, for lack of a good word, I would call them Sherlock Holmes and a little bit of individual, your best detective that you can think in your mind. They are these people. They are the India Pride Project, which is actually run by both Vijay Kumar and Anuragji, and Kirit Mankodi. He's also a retired archaeologist. He also supports a lot of these, finding out unofficial repositories of artifacts, aiding to track stolen objects. These guys are actually, they track down the provenance of these objects, which are there in very rich institutions. I would only name Sotheby and Christie's over here, but there are many museums across the country and the world actually who have objects whose provenance is false, is fake, and is sometimes not correct. So these people actually go around, and I remember Vijayji once saying that museums continue to shed millions and millions in, it's a lost revenue for them, because they don't take proper curatorial judgments. They do not look into acquisition policies that have been there from ages. And if they would have properly pursued a lead, they would have created a good precedent for catching and stopping the kind of looting that is happening and being displayed in their world-renowned institutions. So their idea is basically that they want to remove all these idols or the cultural artifacts from the places where they do not belong and get it back to the country. How much of that we can have a discussion on that, but they say that it's a very the international repatriation and aid, which is like a convention that has been ratified, that India has ratified. It's the 1977 Act. It allows for us to repatriate things from different countries when we have the proper claim of provenance and having been taken by force or having been looted. So there is also the Event of Armed Conflict Convention, and there is the Protection of World Cultural and Natural Heritage that can be ratified at the time of repatriation or any sort of legal case that binds an artifact to a country. So moving along, just to give you a basic idea, sorry, this is, yeah. While you go through this, you can probably understand this is in 2012 to 14, the cases that I was talking to you about. You can see the kind of, it's a sad graphic actually, wherein you can see a lot of patterns in the image, that most of the smuggling happens in the border areas, even if it's a land border or if it's a coastal border. But the most cases have been happening from the south and even from Gujarat, wherein the ease of moving these cultural artifacts is very easy because of the port access. And even the land borders, from wherein we have a lot of artifacts coming down to these places, from where the artifact goes on to its next country or its next stop. The idea behind this, to just give you a clear why do we see so many cases from, or why do we see so many cultural artifacts from Asia or from India or from basic sort of rich historical places, is because we are judged as the source nation, and the market nation is all what we call as the West countries, or the first world countries, or the countries with established museums and all these places. They are the market nations. That is where the object is in demand, and we are the source nation wherein the objects come from. Because like I said, we are a rich historical, we have an abundance of rich historical objects actually. It's just too much. Now this is a small graphic that I had made for the understanding of the loot network that is happening from the site to the shelf. There was a case of a person named as Subhash Kapoor. I don't know if you know of him, but I will definitely, you can Google him and you will probably find. So Subhash Kapoor was arrested in 2011 in Germany, and he was a New York based art dealer, and he was so famous that he used to give around, he used to donate these artifacts. Nobody knew from how, where, what, but he came into light in, I think, 2006 or 7, when the first charges, when he was first suspected. The next slide will show you from when he's been operating. This slide basically is to tell you how these art dealers function. So the particular case in point is the Suthamali idol from Tamil Nadu and his journey to New York. What Kapoor does in his network is he relies on thousands and thousands of small or remote historical sites which are scattered across the country, and they are vulnerable to pillage. I mean, if you can see the first slide, it's like villages in hilly towns or in small hamlets. They at night time, most of these villages are either centered around a temple, or they have a lot of these temples scattered around their area. So what they do is the thieves go around spreading false stories that it is haunted, or that if you go there, this will happen to you, this will befall you. What this leads to is they get a very good opportunity or a window in which they can function and they can steal, so that no one can interfere. Most of this happens in the night. Once they do it, they get it sent to safe houses. In the safe houses, either the art dealers call in the people who want to buy it, or over there they get hacked away. Like if you I can't even say hacked. It's just so sad to say this, but they get hacked into pieces and then they get sent even further. Now, depending on the site and the piece, it either gets ready for transport or it again spends the time in the same region. Over there, multiple copies of it is made. So you can never know which one is the original one, except for the seller, that is in this case Subhash Kapoor. Once this gets done, there are antiquity certificates that are made. So obviously you go to the ASI or to the authority who's going to give you the antiquity certificate to tell you that they have no antiquarian value. And this is called a discretionary certificate that you get from the registered office of the state ASI department. And this declares it to be free to be exported. So what happens in this case is, now that you can disguise it as a fake antiquity, you can put the original among a lot of other modern handicrafts and ship it out with fake cargo forms and fake ASI certificates if there is a case of checking that happens at different ports. So the 2007 case that I was talking about with this Suthamali idol that I've tried to draw in a very poor way, but it was labeled as objects of handicrafts, and they had gotten a certificate from the Tamil Nadu, from the handicrafts department, sorry, of the Union Ministry, the Union Textiles Ministry, and it actually contained the Saint Manikavathar statue from Chennai, and amongst other handicrafts which were also labeled similarly. Some of them were huge tablets which were hacked away, stone tablets, and they were hacked away and they were bundled up to make it look as if it was a garden table, and they were sent out. So now you can see they go through numerous routes. So while you sell this out on the port, you take it out on the port, you send it to one of the other ports. Mostly it goes to Singapore. Hence the private investigators that actually working are based mostly in Singapore. They have their day jobs, by the way, and they from the port, they now start port hopping. The port hopping, what this does, it spends a day, an hour, maybe a week, maybe some months in that port. This generates a fake provenance certificate. This provenance certificate now creates like a kind of legal, it's still fake, it's still illegal actually, but it creates a legal circuit or a legal trail for that particular object. So the fakes are distributed or dispersed, but the original now starts getting a provenance or starts getting an originality, that it was not based or it was not taken illegally from a place. What this does is obviously create a huge smuggling network. It goes to ports which have actually free trade zones and lack of inspections. So this is the kind of circuitous route that I'll stop for the Kapoor one over here. The next slide will tell you, I would like you all to go through here. So it's from 1947. And if you remember, we were talking about a similar time zone, and 1972 is when the acts have started actually getting teeth to solve. So in this case, there was another, I'll talk about another illegal dealer, art dealer. So he's a Jaipur, actually, I don't know if he's still based. Unfortunately, he was acquitted despite getting a 10-year sentence in 2008. So Vaman Narayan Ghia was supposed to have joined in 1970s. So you can only imagine what kind of artifacts he might have been stealing since then. And the kind of his ideology was based on a very simple fact. He would go around moving from site to auction houses, these Polaroid pictures of either objects that were in situ or after removal from the site. He would go to the best buyer and he would give them the Polaroid objects. Now, if the buyer was interested and would want to come down and see more of these structures, he would even give them tours to unprotected archaeological sites in India to sell these artifacts. Like, point, you get it. It's kind of a very unfortunate situation. I mean, if you want, you can also read a book by Peter Watson, the Sotheby, The Inside Story. And over here, Vaman Narayan Ghia was mentioned. His operations were featured in this book. And this was in 1997. So after that, even in 98, there was these people who used to come they were identified and they were literally named out in the public that these are associated with high-end auction houses. Sotheby Christie's are only one, but there are many others which I probably would not want to name because we're getting recorded. And I still have to take this forward as a research. And this started going on. So in India, now he's operating for almost more than 2 decades. And in 2002, there was this operation, and it's called the Operation Black Hole, wherein Ghia was identified, his involvement in looting antiquities, everything, all the connections were made. He was arrested in 2003 from his Jaipur Amer showroom. It was called the Craft Palace. And from there in 2007, you can see a lot of different people have been actually getting connected to this network of illegal trade of the looting. So we have recently Deen Dayalan, his, if you remember the first few slides, I showed you in warehouse of a lot of objects and a person seeing the Nandi artifact. So that was his, it was actually very fun. If you saw the news, the local news, the Tamil local news, you would see how the house was in a very undescriptive, common society neighborhood. And that is where in his garage, in his open garage, he had just closed it up, and that is where he was storing. So if you would have opened the door, if the neighbors would have opened the door, they would have seen all of these artifacts within it. Then 2008, actually, like I mentioned, Ghia was acquitted. And once he was acquitted in 2009, that is when the US Homeland Security, the US federal agencies actually built a case against Subhash Kapoor. And because of him, the connection started happening to art dealers in the country. So there was a Kerala-based art dealer, there was a Chennai one, there was a Tamil Nadu one, and you would get all of these old laptops and old PCs, sorry, in which you would get these Polaroid pictures, and a lot of information was found. 2011, Interpol arrested Subhash Kapoor. Tamil Nadu Idol Police Wing is supposed to have been actually in touch with the US Homeland Security for the same for this person particularly. He is currently in jail. He has stolen more than 2,000 antiquities. The US has a case file on more than 2,000 antiquities, but in the courts he has been registered only for 28. So against him, there's a case of only 28 antiquities. And this is actually very concerning because 28 still means only a small slap on your wrist for 10 years. And that you can see, like from Ghia's case, you can get acquitted if you say that you're of weak health, which Mr. Kapoor has time and again shown. I'll just move on a little bit. There is a curator, Pratap Aditya Pal. He has actually mentioned that the black market for antiquities in our country is very robust. It does not make a distinction between a masterpiece and a generic antique. So there is no kind of distinguishing factor for someone to actually mention or to be able to say that, no, this is of value, this is of lesser value, but still of value. Now, why I'm talking about this value is from the examples you will be able to see. The government is also actually lacking in resources. There are articles which I have which mention the lack of resources that the government has, which I do not want to just make them the focus as they are the only ones who are at fault. But I would suggest that as we are going forward, as we are associated to the cultural field, we should take in consideration a lot of different mitigation possibilities. And the idea behind why this particular topic that I wanted to raise in the risk preparedness group is that there are certain activities or there are certain ways or methodologies that we can take forward. One of them is from England and Wales, where they have this portable antiquity scheme. And it's kind of a act which is a voluntary system wherein you come in, if you find something unlisted from any unlisted or undiscovered areas, you can you are supposed to come to the coroner, that is the person who designates these the antiquity value, within 14 days, and you are given a reward. Now, people can say that, oh, this is not going to happen. Archaeologists can argue saying that people will go around digging things and it will create a sort of hassle for us. But it has shown an involved public and a slowing demand for such objects, because the more you find it and the more it comes out in the public, they are going to give a sort of public awareness happens. It can be a strategic approach. You find an area, you tell people that this is what we've earmarked. If you find something, you get this. It's like, you can't say that finders keepers, but you can always say that if you find something, you give it, you get a reward. Also, you don't get slapped imprisonment or fine or something. Now, the other thing that we can see is, obviously we have a lot of archaeological sites. They are dug up and then they're closed. Some of them are lost to time. Some of them have a lot of importance but are not found. There are cemeteries, there are graves, there are a lot of different things. What Peru does is, it has this very interesting function, which I call technology-based mapping. They map geographical terrain. So we know loot happens even from sites of the buried. So buried sites also get looted. And that is the case for, I think, most of our Indus Valley civilization and other civilizations down south. These can be monitored via technology, drone photography, constant satellite imagery for that place. That can be encouraged if someone wants to take into it as a project. The other thing that I'd actually personally seen in Cambodia was this initiative called Heritage for Kids. And it was kind of very unique approach where Australia and United States both got together. They formed this group called Heritage Watch, and they formed these small children's book in the local dialect, which would implore them to say that this is a bad thing. If you find something, you have to give it. Otherwise, the gods will be angry on you. Or just to create a little sort of intrigue around this, just in taking into consideration local superstitions that would warn against the site looting, because that is the generation that they wanted to actually look after, so that they won't go into stealing. Now, we know these are all documentation efforts. We also need to look into law enforcement. There are two law enforcement agencies already out there. One is Egypt Tourism and Antiquity Police. I think many of us know, because Egypt has been in a lot of news regarding the looting of its museums and all that. They have an Antiquity Police which protects the tourist and archaeological sites in the country. How effective is a matter of concern that is obviously research. But also there's an Italian task force which is internationally used, and they protect heritage in conflict zones. So during war zones, these forces are employed, and they mitigate pillage and vandalism. They protect the area, and you can employ them around the world. You have to be you have to have ratified a certain convention that allows you to utilize their efforts. The last few efforts are obviously, I think some of you know of the International Council of Museums. They are a very good database which has a lot of information about endangered objects as well as networks. So it's an information data bank which gives you what port hopping can a particular object kind do. So if it's an idol, this is the probable route that it will take. So the museums and the countries get a kind of aid tool which allows them to check their provenance certificates with these networks and how to deal with them. So they have toolkits. They have I think as a country, we need to be a part of this museums network, and we should always be constantly at the lookout for in the red list as well as the cultural goods network. So that was kind of a good way for us to go ahead. Now, when I was talking about the value of antiquity being lesser or lesser than the market value, is because Japan has these antiquity markets which are open. You can sell antiquity in the open market. Ownership of nationally significant monuments it has to stay within the country, but it can be sold on the open market based on what the Japan government regulates. So there is market evolutions that come from well-established antique dealers. Yes, there is a catch. The antique dealers can get together and say that this is of lesser value, this is of higher value, or like they can move around that. They can do kind of a 1920 in that. But I think it's more of a good approach that if you allow someone if you allow the country to openly sell or openly display and give the rights to the owners or the people who want to purchase, it kind of gives you rather, it will let the market, let the antiquities to stay within the country rather than having to go through all the regulations and the repatriations. Similar initiatives you can see in Australia, where it's mostly to deal with the shipwrecks along the west coast. It's kind of self-explanatory over there. Of recent in my study, there was this, in 2017, the European Union was actually trying to make trade restrictions. So you have to be very careful in the paper trails while you're doing port hopping. So it was kind of putting these trade restrictions into place to prevent paper trails to be allowed for certain ports. More has to come out from that, from this particular restriction ideologies from their union, actually, because of Brexit and all that. It kind of took a second place. I'll come to an end. This is the second last slide. I hope I'm not taking a lot of people's time, but this is something I'm very excited to actually talk about. We have a need for a lot of inventories. We need to have proper categorization. We need to have domestical markets that are very vigorous and allow objects and artifacts to stay within the country, if not within the site itself. And I think personally, I think that there has been very sparse coverage of in the popular media. We need to raise awareness. We need to develop a sense of sensitivity within the community of cultural heritage practitioners to be able to tell our clients or our stakeholders that this has to remain where it is, and this is the importance of certain things. If you find something, you probably should record it. You should probably start creating an inventory. It can be a crowd-funded inventory, because if you go through the log into the NMA websites and try and get institutional support from wherever you're teaching or you're associated to, get them the information, because we have a tendency to urge and an urge to roam around. And when we find these things, document them. As you can see on this right side is one of the many objects that I found at Taprom when I was visiting for my thesis in 2013. And you can see how brutally things have been hacked. And this is a place which is visited by multiple of people. So just imagine the places which have no visitors are overtaken by either the Greens or are just forgotten. And such losses are going to really affect our understanding of a past that probably we do not look into very with us. I won't say with a magnifying lens, but at least we can do a better job. I'll just end over here that all objects, all phases of culture are alive. They have voices and they speak of their history and interrelatedness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Swapna. You gave us a nice understanding of the processes and the networks in antiquities trade, as well as I was very happy to see the mitigation possibilities.
Yeah.
Worldwide.
Yes, actually, because the thing is that when I was doing the research, I think my initial thought was only to record all of this. And I've realized over the time that it's not, you have to find, I mean, it sounds very funny, but you have to find the positivity and positive part of it somewhere. And these stories of mitigations are very good, even if it is not only to what the country is currently focused on, that is idols and repatriation of idols. But I think there are strategies that can be implied.
So we'll open the floor for questions. If anyone has, please unmute yourself and ask. I have one. Have you come across any communities who come to know the difference when a certain object has been replaced? Or are there any...
Actually, this is very interesting. So remember, I was talking in my presentation about this shivling that was stolen not once, not twice, but thrice. I find it funny, but I'm not actually laughing from inside. It's just the community was actually, it's a royal family, which from its private property, the shivling was stolen thrice. And each time they have actually registered a case. And each time they have realized that it was being tried to be replaced. So it's very heavy. And it's a very heavy and beautiful shivling. I'll try and find the article and I'll share it with you guys. So it's kind of people do know, and most of the times it does not get replaced. So it's just hacked away, stolen, forgotten. And one fine day you go and you open the doors of your property and you're like, oh, where is it? That is if you remember that you had it. That is the worst part, if you remember if you had it. That's the kind of apathy that we have towards cultural artifacts in our country. I think it's all over, and it's not only our country. Stories are horrifying. I hope that answers. I'm not sure.
Thanks.
Yep.
Can I? Okay, no, Swapna, that was very interesting. Really, I learned a lot. I was just wondering if you're aware of what Interpol has been doing recently, and the kind of capacity building strategies they have devised on the illicit trafficking. Have you been following that?
Yes, I have. Actually, I've been following a lot. I think I say this as a gist to myself that my Twitter is only filled with these people. My Twitter does not have anything else. My Twitter is filled with Interpol, Interpol and ICOM and all these people selling and talking about things that are getting stolen. And I have been following them. On a serious note, actually, I have now started looking. So there was a recent article someone from China shared with me. It was about this a normal person who was doing the on-ground looting. So actually the network is very funny. I'm an art dealer, you might be the person on field. So on field, if you are there, you are motivated by money. So this article was about a person in Cambodia who was stealing in the Pol Pot generation. Pol Pot was one of their authoritarian rulers, worse than anyone else, but that is another story. So he was a stealer on ground, and he came out saying that I will identify a lot of these objects in different museums for you. And he specific, so many people had doubts, but he went specifically to show where which portion of that particular idol sitting in a very important museum, I won't give the names, sitting in a very important museum, uska haath kahan pe hai aur uska pair kahan pe hai, in sites in Cambodia. So that's how he got kind of into the news, and the article was formed, and on the basis of which I actually found the Interpol the illicit trafficking guidelines that they're coming up with. I've actually now want to, because it's my part of my research, I'm actually looking into what drives these people to loot. Like what is the cultural interference of a person's upbringing or his surroundings, due to which he or she is actually looting. And it's going to go from Kapoor all the way down to these looters. So I would love everyone's help. I'm going to have, if you have
Are you in touch with Interpol or anybody at Interpol, or no?
Not yet. I'm still formulating my list, but I would definitely love to. I'm going to want to talk to them.
Yeah. So I will put you in touch with Corrado is the guy who is in charge of this. He's very passionate about it, and he has looked all over the world with this issue. And I think he'll love to see what you are doing, and I'm sure he will be able to also inform you many things that you might like to know. So that's one thing you should be definitely following up. I was also thinking about, you mentioned about Italy, and are you in touch with Carboneri or anybody who is working with Carboneri?
No, but I've read a lot about Carboneri and his efforts. So the thing is, I've not talked to anyone except for the private investigators. Now the next stage of my research is going to involve all these people, that is the task force, as well as
Right. Okay, so that's fine. So I'll send you a couple of names. I think it would be important that you get in touch with them, and also maybe you will look into, because one of the things which you touched upon, which I found very interesting and maybe needs more elaboration, is you said the country of source and the country of where it ends up, right?
Yes.
But the most important thing is the in between.
Yes. Yes,
from the country.
it's very funny. So if you just to add to that, in the in between countries is where the investigators are, the private investigators stay. They do
Right.
not come to the source, they do not go to the market, they do all of their research in these in between countries.
Right.
Singapore, Switzerland, and there's one more which I don't want to name because I just feel it's not.
But I think it would be very. Anyways, Swapna, I'll send you an email with some of these things so you can follow up. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Swapna. It was really interesting. And I think it really needs a inquiring mind to actually sit and sift through so much information and come out with data. But the difficult part is that the support of the governments is not there to stop this pilferage.
That is true. That is very true. I still remember having written to almost everyone I know in the government to just give me a sort of information about the repatriation that is happening. So while I was actually doing this research is when something was stolen from Rani Ki Vav in Patan. And the CA over there was a good friend of, we were in good coordination with each other and he could not say anything. But I still remember when it came back or when it was found, he messaged me saying that it is found. And I was very happy that he had that sort of connection to that particular thing. I can't express in words how happy I was that he messaged me, had the courtesy to message me saying that it was found, because it happened, the stealth happened, the loot happened while he was appointed, but it got found while he was still appointed. So it was just like a matter of pride, I think. I don't know. I just feel emotional towards such things. I don't know.
I can understand that. Have you watched this movie, Elgin Marbles?
No, I'm gonna.
Yeah, you must. It's really beautifully done because from Greece, these marbles were taken, I think, to England, right? And they haven't still been returned.
I know about the marbles, but I have not seen the movie. That's interesting.
It's very beautifully done. I really enjoyed it.
That is interesting.
And I want to know personally why you've picked on this as a topic of your research.
So actually, I actually did mention this in the earlier slides. My basic research is about cross-cultural understanding between different communities or institutions and how they interact with each other on heritage, on the heritage playfield. This particular topic I actually got interested was when I was living in New York. I was living in Cornell actually. I had done multiple visits to Met. And one of the visits, like you all know, Met is not a one-stop, one time you cannot just go and see and you find everything. So the second or third visit, I'd actually gone to the Indian Gallery, the Nepal and the Indian Gallery. And I just felt that all the objects were out of place. This entire huge, humongous English building just did not support a lot of the idea. And it got even more strong because at Cornell, we have this place called the Johnson Museum by IMPI, and it's a very huge, beautiful, minimalist IMPI building. And on the last floor was this collection of artifacts of India. And so that's where I started discussing with my professor at Cornell, Michael, and I started. So Michael was already in touch with Vijay and he was doing a lot of these restitution cases in New York. So he got me in touch. He started sending me these articles of loot from India. And that's what actually got the boat sailing in this case. And since then, like I was telling Rohit, my Twitter is only filled with these things. So please, if you ever follow me on Twitter, do not expect anything more. Do not. Yes, yeah. I have seen Women in Gold. I have seen all these movies.
Yeah, even I sit and watch these. It's really interesting to see how art travels.
Yes, it's very interesting. I'm actually trying to get my
art gets stolen and all that kind of stuff. But I think the one thing I feel is that if in some way I mean, of course, I don't agree with any of this process happening.
Yeah.
But what I feel is the problem starts from the mother country where we don't value what we have.
Exactly.
So sometimes I'm just happy that at least it's sitting in a museum and we can actually, like, I think one of the most exciting moments in my life was to see I think there's only one throne from Nadir Shah's loot, which was not melted, and it's sitting in Turkey. And when I saw that in the museum, I was really, like very excited, and I spent a long time just standing in front of it, because otherwise you just read about it in the books.
I think I have a similar story. So this is actually, I don't know if I should be proud or I should have some story to it, but I remember seeing the pearl carpet of Baroda in Qatar. And this was before the current queen had seen it. And I was like, wow, she did not see it. So she claimed not having seen it in a lecture after, I think, Rohit's lecture in that particular year in Baroda. And she was talking about the crown jewels of Baroda. And she made a mention of this pearl carpet. And I was like, wow, I actually saw this before her. And I was like, this is so intriguing. I mean, we have no value for our culture. And it's kind of, even if we bring these things back, where will they go? They will lie in a compound. So I do not agree with most of the idol repatriations, because in our country, once something is hacked from a temple which has been worshipped or was not worshipped, it loses its value. We have lots of restrictions, and hence I want to now understand the cultural understanding that goes behind, or the cultural mindset that goes behind these people who are doing the stealing, who are doing the buying, and who are in the middle of process also. Like, apart from money, what drives them, and what's the kind of thought that goes behind it? It's huge, but
yeah.
I would love it.
Swapna,
Yes.
Just to build on whatever you have said, whatever Smita has mentioned, you mentioned that this trend is being initiated from the dealer who has a need, and then it comes to the source country. They find it out where it is.
Sorry.
Yeah, please continue.
So it's like the chicken and the egg question. Which one came first? I call it the chicken and the egg question, because if you read Sotheby, the Insider's Game by Peter Watson, you'll realize that a couple of these instances are wherein a party wants to have a sort of an object in their home which defies or which signifies something. Now, if you look back to our history, obviously we have had a lot of invasions and a lot of people coming here wanting to do something on the weekends. And if I put it very crudely, it's like saying, I like something, I pick it up from the market and I put it back at my home. My home, it can be somewhere in India, it can be somewhere in the US, whichever place I call my home or my final resting place is where I do it. Now, this was something that was introduced to us as cabinets of curiosities. There is a particular painting of a person. I don't know if you've seen, let's say, Tintin.
Yeah.
You might have seen Tintin. So in Tintin also, this painting actually is featured. So he opens, there's a white British male officer. He opens a red curtain, a red velvet curtain, and behind it is amazing object. So this is actually a painting, and this is a painting from one of the Mughal courts, one of the British officers in a Mughal court. And he has a similar house in England. I forget the name of the place, but he has a similar entire cabinet of curiosities. And that is where the idea of museums, and that is where the idea of preservation and all these things come in. So this is where you say that someone comes in, they say, I like this particular object to fit in. Now, just to answer it in a very different way, have you, I don't know if you follow National Geographic. National Geographic has been covering a story on how people are putting dinosaur eggs, dinosaur heads, dinosaur tails and all that in their living rooms. So it's kind of becoming a sort of trend to have these objects within their living space. The same trend was with the cultural objects, which is why when someone wants to buy something, they have either A, money, they have a requirement to just beautify their spaces, or 3, they are just of the nature of loot. So if you know of the stories of Ghazni and Khilji and all these people, they came in for loot to take in something that they felt. And I think it should not be stopped at Ghazni or Khilji. It also went down to the Marathas and all. A lot of people invading powers, and whatever they would take in would become a part of their repertoire of objects. So I think it comes from both sides. Now, if you find someone actually stealing or wanting a particular object, you become business minded and you start saying, oh, the clock starts running in your head, and you said, okay, I want to, if he wants it, I can give it to him. I can get it for him. I can source it for him. So if you go to these old historic markets, like where Ghia was operating from, Jaipur, you would obviously see these foreigners coming in there to buy something unique. What do you do for them? You do this for them. And Ghia has actually mentioned this, that I had in my early years in the 70s to be a notch apart from all the people in the street. I would give my customers something different. And this is what he would do in different. Unfortunate, but that's how it worked.
But I don't think we are able to resolve any of these issues. We can only like document them, bring them into the foreground.
Yeah.
But to resolve them, we need to have, I think we need to have international ways to look at it.
Yes, definitely.
Because just national won't really help.
I think there is no national kind of...
For heritage objects, I think there are no boundaries.
There are no boundaries.
Like these geographical boundaries don't exist. I mean, they don't exist with art dealers. They don't exist with the governments.
I personally know of a person in Baroda who has almost 37 antiquities which are not registered, and they are of a similar kind. And I can't do anything except be a good person and tell him to get it registered in batches so that it stays at least within the country, because I know for a fact that that person won't sell it to anyone outside. But you never know, circumstances can make a person do anything. So even the repatriations that are happening currently are only for idols. Church altars get stolen.
Swapna, so you have shown the map of where the cases are being registered about the looting.
Yeah.
Does it have any connection with the natural disasters happening, or a disaster is a precursor for any of this?
That's very interesting. So these cases were registered, I think, between 2000. So the map that I showed you was a kind of map wherein the cases were from 2002 to 2014. And sorry, only not 2002, 2012 to 2014. Now 2 years of case. Within that, if you look at it, probably you can make a sort of connection to it, but I have not personally done it. But that is very interesting. I would probably look into that now.
Another thing, I have just came back from Banaras.
Yeah.
So these projects, revitalization, rejuvenation, or whatever you can call it.
Yeah.
So does it contribute towards this trend of, or is it become a precursor?
Okay, so that's revitalization, rejuvenation, like you say, are mostly for like the built heritage, that is like stationary heritage, I would say. Repatriation, Banaras case and all this, I'm sure there are multiple cases that have been like objects that have been stolen from there. Repatriation in these cases, in the overall gamut of what is happening right now in Banaras, I don't think so. No. First and foremost is because living. So it's kind of, that's why I had put the disclaimer actually. Excuse me if I say anything wrong and hurt anyone's sentiments, but in our country, we are a very religious country, and our religious country means that our idols, our temple spaces, our religious spaces are constantly being renewed, renovated, and someone coming in to tell you that this is getting rejuvenated, whatever you use, whatever word you want to use. But in this case, if the idol gets stolen, there is always a backup of an idol, especially in the bigger ones. So you normally might not be seeing the original idol out there. The ones in the inner sanctum are probably the ones which you do not have access to, and it, as long as it remains like that but is used by 3 or 4 people, is the best for it. The moment you put in all these concerns of putting that area into openness and all that, I mean, as much of a feminist I am, I just feel that no, we should not do it. Let's leave it where it was. Let's not get into the headache of making these spaces come out to the public. Let it remain there. Yes, but it has to be protected. Now, otherwise there are people.
Sure. I mean, the pujari himself may be part of the racket.
Yes. And there are cases where pujaris have been hacked to death because the person knows, the thief knows that at this particular time, only the pujari will be allowed and he will be the only person over there. So if you're giving these private viewings to these individuals, I think you have to put your guard up and say that, I don't know. I mean, it was a very gruesome case in 2008.
Yeah, talking about like putting a guard up and having like a backup. So are there any innovation technologies that are being incorporated into, like, when you're saying renovation is becoming a norm, shouldn't geotagging or putting QR codes become a norm too?
It should. I mean, there are many ways in which you can actually record our data. Like I said, inventories are the only way to go. I mean, I'm not going to say that we can stop all the theft or we can be a nationalist, like you all said just clearly, that I don't want to be the person who's saying, no, I want everything at my home. जो भी आपने लूट किया है वो सब वापस कर जाओ. नहीं, I don't want to be that person. I want to be the person who says that no, this is where it has come from. You keep it in your place. We can have a moving exhibition. You keep it at your place. You give it to us 6 months, you keep it at your place 6 months. But recognize that this was stolen, and correct the provenance. Correct the provenance in such a way that we have the rightful claim. The country has the rightful claim. We can't just say 7 million antiquities out of the blue. Oh, we have 7 million antiquities and let's do a 5-year mandate and go recording all of that. That's not possible. As if we don't have anything else to do in our country. That's just not possible. But give this onus to everyone out there. Institutions ko hire karo. I know of someone who was actually in this NMMA thing, and he clearly told me that it's just not possible. Swapna, the amount of efforts we spent in the first 2 years just to make inroads into institutions and tell them that these are the kind of things you have in your backyard, it took them 2 years.
I understand. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm very excited.
So, does anyone have any more questions? Shall we proceed?
I just want to add a bit, because I've been thank you, Swapna, for that presentation. And the entire time I was actually wondering, the mental kind. You did mention about it that why are people stealing it, and what is the main idea, and things like demand and supply, things like that were continuously kind of roaming in my mind. That what if we like reduce the demand, will the stealing stop or something like that? But I was actually thinking of another example which happened, which I got to know very recently. We actually went out for a cycling trip to Murshidabad, which is again a historic kind of town near Bengal. And we were told that, there was this one particular person from the then royal kingdom who actually built his house using the bricks of a certain mosque, which is in a very dilapidated state right now. And there is a customary trend where everyone after that who's built their houses, they have picked up bricks from those mosques. And, half of the mosque is actually now gone. Like there are stories like that this wall is, can be found in the houses of different people in Murshidabad. And even today, like since we were in cycles, we could go into the smaller lanes of the town. And we found, a person who was building his house. And we asked him that, did you pick a brick? Very, very colloquially. He's like, yeah, this is it. We generally, put the brick underneath our main thing and, we do our puja and then we start building our house. So it's become a customary kind of a thing that they don't know why they're doing it. But since it has been a trend, they keep doing it. But,
I think it's good. I think very good. I mean, at least we are saving that. I mean, if today's age and time is doing it, good. Yeah. But at least make sure that you have that mosque documented. I only care for that. At least people should know. If it's already dilapidated, maybe we cannot save it. Maybe you want to save it. Maybe there is no reason for saving it, but at least it's being used. It's living heritage. It's continuing its cycle of life. Interesting, very interesting.
So
I think what would be very interesting is to have a virtual museum of artifacts which are outside India.
Yeah.
I think that if your research could lead to location of these artifacts and that could then become a web museum, it would be really interesting.
Definitely. So actually the thing is, people going around searching for these objects, they go around very stealthily and they find these objects and they say that, let's check the provenance of them to get them. Actually, they would really love this idea. That's maybe they would have thought of it. Maybe they have something, but the thing is, you can't. I'll think about it. Thank you, Smitaji.
Presentation was really change, and it's a wonderful start for this new year.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
From on behalf of my coordinator Priyanka and all of the members, I thank you for taking out time, as well as all of the members who have taken out their time and came here for this wonderful presentation. Thank you.